Don't be too alarmed, but I'm about to read your mind. Okay. Katie, have you not read any of those books on that cart back there? No. This right here is my lovely TBR cart that is full of all of the physical books that I have yet to read, but I've bought. One of my biggest goals for this year is I want to read every single book that is on this cart that I bought before 2026. Which, if I'm being honest with you right now, that's the majority of the books on here. Also, at the very end, I'm going to count up all the books on this list, and I am not allowed to go over that number of books on my TBR for the rest of the year. Thought that would be a fun challenge too. We're going to start with this first row right here, which is full of all of my hardcovers, besides these two because I didn't have room for them up there. And the first book is The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This is actually on my May TBR, so I do have plans to get to this very soon. This is following a woman named Sybil who writes letters to make sense of her life, and it is told through the letters that she writes. And I'm super excited to get to this book because I love letters and books, but also because everybody has amazing things to say about this one. I've also heard so many people say that if you like the Unselected Journals of Emma and Lyon, which I never shut up about, I love that series so much, you would really enjoy this, and vice versa, so I feel like I'm really gonna enjoy this one. Next up is The Burning Side by Sarah DeMoff. This is coming out in May. Funnily enough, this is also on my May TBR and also one of my Book of the Month picks for the month of May. Sarah DeMoff's debut novel, The Bright Years, came out last year and everybody loved it, so whenever I heard this one was coming out, I knew I had to get my hands on it. I would really love to go back and read The Bright Years after I read this one as well. This book is following our two main characters, April and Leo, and their marriage is on the brink of collapse, and something catastrophic ends up happening to them, and they're forced to face everything that's going on in their life and question if their marriage is really worth it. It sounds very intriguing. Absolutely love a book with some drama, and I'm really excited to see what I think of her writing since she's been so widely talked about. Next up is Bare Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This book came out last year, and last year I actually read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It was on my TBR cart for years until I got to it, and oh my gosh, I love that book so much, and it made me realize how much I love V.E. Schwab's writing, so I am so excited to get to this one. This is also on my 2026 TBR, so I will definitely be reading it sometime this year, probably more in the fall/winter time, I'm thinking, unless I get an itch to read it sometime this summer. The little blurb on the back says, 3 young women, their bodies planted in the same soil, their stories tangling like roots. One grows high, and one grows deep, and one grows wild, and all of them grow teeth. And a lot of people have described this book as following toxic lesbian vampires throughout the years, so you follow them in 1532, 1827, and 2019. And a lot of people have also said that the way that the story is told is very reminiscent of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and since I enjoyed that one so much, I'm hoping I'll enjoy this one. And then after I read this one of my goals is to read one of her series. I'm not sure what I'm going to start with, but I'm so excited to get to this eventually. The next book is Alchemy of Secrets by Stephanie Garber. This was her new release last year. This is her first dive into adult fantasy. I, like most, have read the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, and I absolutely loved it. I didn't really enjoy Caraval as much, if I'm being honest, but because of how much I enjoyed the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy by her, I'm very excited to read this eventually. I have heard mixed reviews, so I think that's why I have been putting it off just a little bit. I feel like most of the time whenever I see too many reviews for a book, whether they're mixed, not great, or really great, I do tend to put off those books a little bit just so I can kind of remove myself a bit from that discussion around the book and form more of my own thoughts. So that's kind of what this book has fallen into. This book is following our main character Holland, and she's currently enrolled in a college class with a professor who tells these stories that a lot of people seem to think are not real, but Holland actually believes in them. So Holland believes magic is real, and she ends up meeting this person who sends her on this quest for this object, or a lot of different things are gonna go wrong. Even though this book is not a fairy tale fantasy like the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, I feel like it's still gonna have that really strong mystery element that Caraval and Once Upon a Broken Heart did, where you really just never know where Stephanie Garber is gonna take you next. Next, we have the book that is currently that girl right now. Everybody and their mama is reading this and absolutely loving it, and that is Into the Blue by Emma Brody. I'm gonna be so completely honest with you guys, the only thing I know about this book is that it's a love story, because I read that part right there. I tend to, if a book is very hyped up, not read the synopsis. I will read the tiny little blurb at the beginning, but I feel like when I'm really excited to read a book or it's super hyped up, super well loved, I don't want to read the full synopsis because sometimes that can give things away, and I honestly just want to go into this as blind as I possibly can. I find that the smaller blurbs don't really give much away, but leave me wanting more. So that's what I'm gonna read you right now. It says, an epic decade-spanning love story that blazes through the worlds of acting and comedy and charts a connection so powerful it might just break space and time itself. Yeah, I'm gonna absolutely love this book. I also see Saturday Night Live in italics. I love Saturday Night Live. I grew up watching it all the time. I just love comedy in general. I was involved in musical theater growing up, so I just love this world, and now I'm even more excited to read this and see what I think of it. Maybe I will be reading this sooner than I thought. Next up up, we have How to Kill a Guy in 10 Dates. This is by Shaylee Thompson. All I really know about this one is that it's a horror romance, and if you know me, you know I get scared of quite literally everything. And this says, dating is cutthroat in this swoony and scary slasher rom-com. Color me terrified. I picked this one out for book of the month because I was like, okay, it's horror, but it's also romance. Like, I think I could dig that. And since I haven't read it yet, I have yet to find out if I can indeed dig it. But I am quite nervous to get into this just because it is a little bit outside my comfort zone, but I also think the cover is really pretty. And I know our main character ends up going speed dating. That's why there's a little stopwatch right here, and then things just kind of lead from there. I don't really know. I don't know what to expect, and I think that's why this one is making me nervous, but I'm also excited to read it. Next we have A Good Animal by Sarah Moorer. This is following our male main character, and he wants to stay in his hometown and work on the farm that his family has and just have a very small town life. And he ends up falling in love with a girl who wants the complete opposite. She wants to move to the big city. She wants big things for herself. And right here in the synopsis it says, together they make an impulsive choice, one that could change everything. And this is also Sarah Moorer's debut novel. I really don't know what to expect. On the totally opposite end of the spectrum, we have the second book in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. This is Carl's Doomsday Scenario by Matt Denneman. Last year I did a book swap with my husband Luke, and I picked out the first Dungeon Crawler Carl book for him, and he really loved it. So much so, I've never seen him read like this before. But he was absolutely steamrolling through those books. There were 7 of them out at the time, and he ended up reading them in the span of just a few months. There were several times where he would go to the bookstore after work just because he needed to pick up the next one because of how the last book in the series ended off. And because he loved this series so much, he's been talking about it so much, I was like, okay, like I have to read this. And because Luke already read them, I do have all of the copies already, but this one is the only one that is currently on my TBR cart. I liked the first one, and I can definitely see why Luke really likes the series, but I'm intrigued to get more into the political side of the series as it goes on. This book is following our main character Carl, and his world as he knows it has completely changed in an instant, and his life has now become one long dungeon crawling game. I'm not really sure when I want to continue this series. I believe I read the first one sometime in December, so it's been a little bit, but I have been really good the past year or so reading series more back to back, and I do want to read the rest of the series closer together. I just have some other series that I'm prioritizing right now, so I don't know when I'll get to this. Maybe like later summer I'll focus on this series. Next up is my other book of the month pick for the month of May, and that is Good Joy, Bad Joy by Mickey Brammer. This is following our main character Joy. Shocker, I know. Joy and her best friend are pretty opposite. Hazel is very adventurous and Joy is very by the book. She's a rule follower. But when Hazel ends up getting some really hard medical news, things end up changing, and Joy ends up starting to see the world in a different way, which leads her to becoming more adventurous. I feel like this book is going to talk a lot about grief, a lot about female friendship, and those are some of my favorite books, so I am really excited to get to this one eventually. I also have Buckeye by Patrick Ryan. This is another one of those literary fictions that is very family drama forward. There ends up being a moment between 2 of our characters around the war time, and then one of our characters ends up being a seer, specifically a seer who can conjure the dead. There's also a lot of small town elements, so we'll have drama there as well. I don't know. I really don't know what I'm going to get out of this one, but it sounds drama filled, so sign me up. Next is another book that everybody's been talking about recently, and that is Yesteryear by Carol Claire Burke. And the synopsis of this one absolutely got me. When I heard about what this book was about, I was like, yeah, I will be buying that immediately, and I want to read that now. This is about a modern day tradwife influencer who isn't actually a tradwife. She's just a tradwife for the cameras. But she ends up somehow going back to the 1800s, and she actually has to be a tradwife. Does that not sound insane to you? I just know I'm gonna get something out of this book. It sounds so deeply interesting. It sounds right up my alley. I cannot wait. I've heard that this book is quite humorous while also being very dark, and I'm very interested to see what she has to say about our main character being an influencer and also taking a more traditional conservative route, and her actually having to really fulfill that role without all the cameras and all the help in the past. And I also love magical realism, so I feel like I'm really gonna like this one. Speaking of magical realism, the last book on the top row is The Second Chance Cinema by Thea Weiss. This is following a newly engaged couple who ends up stumbling upon this magical cinema one day where they're reliving their own memories through the screen, and this is leading them to a lot of questions if they even want to get married at this point. I feel like this is a very interesting concept for a romance book, and I've never read anything by this author, so I'm deeply intrigued. And I know I keep saying that I'm excited about every single book, but I hope I'm excited to read it because I bought it. Switching things up a little bit and starting on this side with the overflow of the hardcovers from the first row. The first book we have is Kitty St. Clair's Last Dance. This is by Kate Robb, and there's also magical realism in this romance as well. This is following our main character Jules, and she inherits a dance hall from Kitty St. Clair, who has since passed, and our main character Reeve wants to turn the dance hall into luxury vacation condos. He's one of those guys, unfortunately. They do live in a tiny vacation town though, so I feel like this is going to be perfect for the summer. This is actually also on my May TBR, so it's a great time to read it. It also seems like Reeve and Jules also have a little bit of history, so we got a little bit of a second chance romance going on, and then at the same time Jules is able to see Kitty in her dreams. I don't really know. We got a lot going on, but it does sound interesting. The last hardcover that I have on my physical TBR is a new release that released not even a week ago when I'm filming this, and that is Our Perfect Storm by Carly Fortune. I have an interesting relationship with Carly Fortune. I read Every Summer After. I really loved her writing, and I've continued to love her writing more and more from every single book that I've read from her, but the plot of that book I didn't love. Didn't love the plot of her second book, Meet Me at the Lake, either, but then I read This Summer Will Be Different, her book that came out 2 years ago, and I really liked that one, and then last year One Golden Summer by her was a 5-star read for me, so I'm really excited to read her newest release. This is following our two main characters, Frankie and George, and they're childhood best friends, but they've had a recent falling out. It's Frankie's wedding weekend. She's like, is George even gonna show up? Lo and behold, George does end up showing up, but Frankie's fiance ends up ending things, so they decide to go on that would-be honeymoon together, because why would you waste a trip that you've already paid for? And this trip is supposed to be one last chance for them to repair their friendship. I'm assuming that it's going to be a little bit more than that. I also love her covers. I love the watercolor look. I love the colors that she chooses to put together. They're just always so beautiful. I will definitely be reading this sometime in the month of May, because this is actually my book club book with my friends Kristen and Olivia, so we're all going to read it together, and I'm so excited. Hopefully by then it'll be warm enough that I can read it outside or by the pool. Preferably, that would be really nice. Next up, we have a classic book talk duology, and that is the Six of Crows duology. We have the first book, Six of Crows, and the second book, Crooked Kingdom. These are by Leigh Bardugo. And I actually have read the first one, Six of Crows. I read it years ago. I don't even know how many at this point. But at the time, I hadn't read a ton of fantasy, nor had I read multiple POV fantasies. So looking back, I didn't have a great experience with this book. I was really confused for the most part. I just didn't follow it as much as I think I could now. So it is on the cart because I would love to reread it before I get to Crooked Kingdom, because I've been putting off Crooked Kingdom for years since I read this one. This duology is so high up on my TBR right now. If I get a single itch to read these books, I will be reading them. Hopefully I'll be reading them somewhat close together. This series is following a group of individuals who are doing their own things, but they come together to pull off a heist. Looking back now at the politics, especially at the end with the plot twist of this first book, it was very intriguing to me, and I did want to read the second one, but I feel like I just didn't get it then, or at least didn't get it as much as I could now. So I'm really looking forward to giving this duology another chance sometime this year, probably more in the fall. If I do not read these books by the end of the year, I give you guys permission to yell at me. Like, please, honestly, yell at me in the comments right now. If there's any book on here you're like, Katie, you need to read that right now, please do tell me, because I could do with a good yelling at. Maybe that'll give me some motivation. Next up is the only Kristen Hanna that I currently have on my physical TBR, and that is The Night Road. On the back, it says, life comes down to a series of choices. To hold on, to let go, to forget, to forgive. Which road will you take? I remember I got this book for my 24th birthday, and it's because I looked at the cover and I was like, this is screaming winter, right? And my birthday's in February. I was like, okay, I can read this winter. This is perfect. And unfortunately, this book does seem like it's more set to read in the summer, and I didn't read it last summer, so hopefully I will get to this one this summer. This is following our main character, who is a stay-at-home mom, and she has twin teenagers who end up becoming friends with a new teen in town, and one thing leads to another over the summer, where it says that one careless mistake can change everything. It also says in the years that follow, so it seems like we're going to be following them through a long period of time, which I always really enjoy in Kristen Hanna books. You get to spend so much time with her characters, and I feel like because of that, it gives her so much more of an opportunity to tell their stories fully. I love Kristen Hanna's writing and storytelling, so I'm really excited to read another book by her sometime soon. Then we have Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This is on my 2026 TBR. I'm kind of intimidated by R.F. Kuang as an author. For some reason, I've had it in my mind for quite some time now that I'm not smart enough to read a book by her, just because she is so incredibly educated, and I feel like I'm just selling myself too short, especially whenever I haven't even read anything by her. And I think I would like to start with Yellowface. This is following our main character June, and she has this friend Athena, and they're both authors, and they were supposed to be rising stars together, and Athena's career is taken off. but June is kind of left at the wayside. June ends up witnessing Athena's untimely death from an accident. On impulse, she ends up stealing Athena's most recent work that she has yet to publish, and she ends up publishing that work as if it is her own. I am so interested in the storyline of this, especially because the last sentence on the back says Yellowface grapples with questions of diversity, racism, and cultural appropriation, as well as the terrifying alienation of social media, and that just sounds really intriguing. Another book on my TBR for the year is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. I don't even know how long this book has been on this cart, but I think one of the reasons why it's been on here for so long is because it is a standalone fantasy, and I find that when I'm in the mood for fantasy, I normally gravitate towards continuing a series that I've already started instead of just reading a standalone. But this book will be getting read sometime this year, mark my words. This is following our main character, Elizabeth, and I've read the blurb for this one several times and it's really good, so I'm just gonna read you the back. All sorcerers are evil. Elizabeth has known that as long as she has known anything. Raised as a foundling in one of Ostermere's great libraries, Elizabeth has grown up among magical grimoires that rattle beneath iron chains, capable of transforming into grotesque monsters. When an act of sabotage releases the library's most dangerous grimoire, Elizabeth is accused of treason, with no one to turn to but her sworn enemy, the sorcerer Nathaniel Thorne, and his mysterious servant. She finds herself entangled in a centuries-old conspiracy. Not only could the great libraries go up in flames, but the world along with them. That just sounds really good. I'm definitely sensing some sort of a romance between Elizabeth and Nathaniel Thorne. I love books with magic. There's also a magical library. It just sounds so up my alley. Next is Deep Cuts. This is the new paperback edition that just recently came out. This is also becoming a movie. I don't know when. Let me look that up. I know that A24 is doing it though. It says that it's expected late this year or sometime in 2027, so not really clear on when the movie's coming out, but I'm hoping to read this before the movie ends up coming out. This is following our two main characters, Percy and Joe, and it's set during the 2000s, and they're both deeply obsessed with music, but in different ways, and they end up working together to build something out of their obsession with music. I love the 2000s, especially the music in the 2000s, and I've never read a book set in the 2000s, so I'm really interested. It also seems like there's gonna be quite a bit of drama going on as well, just from what I've heard about this book, and it also says it was the love story of a decade, or it should have been. I'm really excited for this. It seems like it's gonna be short and sweet and full of drama, which is exactly what I'm always looking for. I am so unbelievably excited to get to this next book, and that is Writers and Lovers by Lily King. I read Heart the Lover by her earlier this year, and I absolutely loved it. It's one of my favorite books of the year so far, and Writers and Lovers is the prequel to Heart the Lover, and I just fell in love with Lily King's writing style in Heart the Lover. It's very straight to the point and succinct. It's not flowery, but she also leaves the perfect amount up for assumption or up for your own interpretation, and I just feel like it's the perfect mixture of literary fiction writing in specific for me. Since I read Heart the Lover first, and this is technically a prequel, I'm interested to see what my perspective is going to be on which one I think you should read first. Even if I feel like I should have read Writers and Lovers first, I feel like I'm still gonna have a good experience with it just because I love her writing so much, and I really connected with Heart the Lover's story as well. And I find it really interesting because this book was written in 2020 and then Heart the Lover came out in 2025. So there's 5 years in between both of these books, and because of that, I'm interested to see what her writing was like 5 years ago. Next is a book that I have no idea how long it's been on my TBR at this point, and that is The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. This is the first book in this interconnected series that came before the Part of Your World interconnected series, and I bought this after I read the Part of Your World interconnected series because I loved that one so much, but then I read Sail Remember Me last year, and it just kind of put me off to her as a whole. But I also feel like I should at least come back to this and give it another chance before I totally write her off, because I have so many books that I have really enjoyed by her. This is following our two main characters, Kristen and Josh. It's dual POV like her other books, and they're the maid of honor and the best man in their friend's upcoming wedding, and they end up getting along great, but there's just other things that are pulling them apart. It says the friend zone will have you laughing one moment and grabbing for tissues the next, as it tackles the realities of infertility and loss with wit, heart, and a lot of sass, which is just classic Abby Jimenez. I don't know how I feel about the sprayed edges on this, but the next book is Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. I bought this during the time where I really fully believed in the idea of having auto by authors, and I don't think that I personally subscribe to that mentality anymore, especially as authors are maybe trying out different genres or trying out different certain tropes in books that I feel like just maybe aren't for me. And I feel like because I bought this at that time, this is definitely a book that I have no idea what I'm going to think about it whenever I read it. It says a competitive diver and an ace swimmer jump into forbidden waters in this steamy college romance. I just have no idea what I will think of this, because I feel like this is more spice forward and lust forward for romance than a slow burn type of romance, which is more my speed, but I still do want to read it and give it a chance. I love Ali Hazelwood's writing no matter what she's writing. I'm probably at least going to have a fun time reading it, and that is why this one is still on the cart at this point. point, but I am a wee bit nervous to give this one a chance because I just have no idea what I want to think about it. Next, I have Mad About You by Fari McFarland. I have heard amazing things about her books, but I have never read one by her, and I figured I would start here because after I had heard such glowing reviews, I went to the bookstore and I read the back of a few of her books. This is following Harriet. She doesn't really believe in love, even though she is a wedding photographer, which also means that she loathes the idea of marriage, and one day her partner ends up proposing and she freaks out and she has to move out of their place that they share together. So she ends up moving in with this guy named Cal that has had his own wedding related disaster, but he's a hopeless romantic, and they end up becoming friends through this process and getting to know each other and being there for each other. And I think you can assume that one thing leads to another and things end up happening for them. I'm just really excited to read this book and see what I think of her writing and if I like it. The last book on the second row right here is Lovely War. This is by Julie Berry. The blurb on the back says, in the perilous days of World Wars I and II, the gods held the fates and the hearts of 4 mortals in their hands. And just from flipping through here, it seems like you get the perspectives of the Greek gods. I don't really know too much about Greek gods. I've never been too into them. We'll probably talk more about that here in a second whenever you see what other book I have on my TBR. But I know so many people love and adore this fantasy book. I'm hoping to read this sometime during like the fall and winter of 2026. And I also do love that it's a fantasy with more historical elements. I feel like it's going to be something that I could really enjoy. Now we're moving on to my last row right here. Most of these are series and they're in here pretty tight with my TBR drop, so I'm just gonna take that out. We'll start with the few first books in a series that I have, but I don't have the rest of the series because I'm decided to be more smart lately and read the first book before I buy the rest of the series, so then I'm gonna know if I'm gonna enjoy it or not, or if I even want to continue the rest of the series before I buy it all. This first one is an arc that I actually received last year, and this is called House of Dragons by K.E. Lind. This is following our main character. She's half fae and half human. Her name is Kerrigan, and she ends up being dropped off at the House of Dragons, which is an elite training program for gifted fae. And each student on their 17th birthday that is a part of this program will be chosen by one of the 12 houses of Elandria to enter society, and everyone is chosen besides Kerrigan. It sounds like your classic fantasy setup. I love a fantasy book, and I feel like I'm re-entering my love for fantasy again. So I don't know, I'm excited to read it. I also don't know whenever the second one is coming out, so I feel like there's less pressure for me to read this one currently. And I honestly might wait to read this one until a little bit before the second one comes out, because then I won't have as much time to wait in between books, and also it'll give me time to decide if I even want to continue the series. Next we have Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Lynn Tan. This is one that I feel like I've been putting off for quite some time just because it is the beginning of a duology, and for a while there last year I didn't want to start any new series before I had finished quite a few, but I feel like I'm very close to wanting to start this because I have been finishing a lot of series recently. Also, this cover, are you kidding me? This is to die for. This is what made me want to pick up the book in the first place. This is said to be an enchanting romantic duology that weaves ancient Chinese mythology into a sweeping adventure of immortals and magic, of loss and sacrifice, where love vies with honor, dreams are fraught with betrayal, and hope emerges triumphant. Honestly, it being about Chinese mythology sounds very intriguing to me because I've never read a fantasy that's inspired by Chinese mythology. So it's going to be something a little bit more unique and different, which I feel like I'm going to enjoy quite a lot. And I also just love a duology. Like, if you can wrap up a whole story in 2 books, I'm sat, because that's a lot less pressure than having to read like a whole 8-book series. So I love that. The last first book in a series that I have down here is Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This is actually a sci-fi trilogy, I believe, and it's following superheroes, which sounds super intriguing to me, but I just haven't gotten to it yet because I was prioritizing so many other series. Secret identities, extraordinary powers, she wants vengeance, he wants justice. Wow. I honestly can't tell if we get multiple BOVs in here. I can't tell by just flipping through it, but we're following the Renegades, and they're humans with extraordinary abilities, so they're the ones with superpowers. And it says that they've established peace and order where chaos reigned. And there's also villains involved, and it seemed like our main character Nova is a part of the villains? No, Nova's allegiance is to a villain who has the power to end them both. I have no idea, guys. But from what I've just read, it made me excited to read it again. So I'm excited to get to this one eventually. Now it is time to talk about the full series that I had down here waiting for me to read. And the first one is The Ember and the Ashes Quartet. I did already read the first book in the series, so I just have the other 3. This series is by Sabaa Tahir. We have the second book, A Torch Against the Night. This is actually on my May TBR. I'm super excited to get to it. I'm really trying to prioritize this fantasy series right now so I can finish it soon so I can move on to this other series that I'm about to talk with you guys about. The third book is called A Reaper at the Gates, and the fourth book is called A Sky Beyond the Storm. I really enjoyed the first book in Ember in the Ashes when I read it in December. It's a dual POV fantasy romance that's following our main character, Elias, who is a soldier for the Empire, but he doesn't really believe in what they're doing, but he's so tied up in it that it's really hard for him to get out. He is treated very poorly, and he's also done some things that aren't so great as well. And then we have our main character, Laya, who is a part of the other side of the coin. She ends up becoming a slave and is actually a part of the rebellion in some sort of way. I don't want to get too into that because I don't want to give anything away, because I feel like it's a very interesting way that Sabaa here constructed this plot line, but I really liked the first one, so I'm excited to continue the rest of the series sometime soon. And I also just love these covers, and I'm really excited to put the spines up on my bookshelf because them aligning like that is really cool. I love stuff like that. We are finally now to the last books that I have on my physical TBR. This is a 5-book series, and you're gonna be like, Katie, how have you not read these yet? You're 25, like what are you doing? And I'm gonna say, I have no idea. And this series is Percy Jackson and the Olympians. I surprisingly never read these growing up. I don't know how I never read them because they were so widely talked about. Everyone was reading them. It was like a rite of passage during the time that I grew up, but these just slipped past me, and I will be reading them now for the first time as an adult. And I'm really crossing my fingers that I absolutely love them. I have never watched the movies. I've never seen the TV show. I am really excited to watch both of those though after I read these. I've heard mixed things about the movies. Well, maybe not mixed. I've heard that the movies are not very great, but I've heard that the TV show is good so far. Anyways, we have the first book, The Lightning Thief. The second book is The Sea of Monsters. The third book is The Titan's Curse, and the fourth one is The Battle of the Labyrinth. And then the fifth and final book is The Last Olympian. I have a big hope to read this entire series sometime this summer. I don't even know how many pages these are, and they all look pretty short. This first one is 375 pages, which for a fantasy book I feel like is pretty short. I really love YA fantasy, so I think I'm gonna enjoy these, especially because so many people love them. And I'm thinking about maybe filming a reading vlog where I read all of these and kind of give my perspective as an adult reading this series for the first time. So if you guys are interested in that reading vlog, let me know in the comments down below. I'm really excited to get to these though sometime this summer. And according to Fable, I currently have 35 books on my TBR cart, which honestly, I'm not mad at that number. I don't even have enough to fill up this whole front side, so it feels pretty good. And I will also not be surpassing 35 books on my TBR cart for the rest of the year. So take a good look. This is as full as she will be for the rest of the year. And those are all the books that are currently on my physical TBR. Please do let me know if you want to see any of these books and reading vlogs. If you're like, Katie, how have you not read that yet? Please read that right now. Please do yell at me in the comments. And if you watched until this far in the video, in honor of the last books I talked about, the Percy Jackson series, go ahead and comment down below the lightning bolt emoji so I know who the real ones are who watched until the very end. And I think that's gonna be it from me and my TBR cart today. I love you guys so much. Hope you're all having an amazing day, and I will see you guys in my next video coming real soon. Bye guys. Peace.